Steve Carman, good to see you. Your hand's gone up as well. All right, welcome to those joining us. Thank you very much for taking time out, those busy schedules, and welcome to this, the first of the Aston Barclay webinars, hopefully the first of many. So we'll just let people join the room, give us a wave, give us a message in the chat function. We'll give ourselves some time to familiarise ourselves. So who we got? We've got Laura Goldrup, we've got Leslie White, we've got Lisa Jenkinson, good to see you. Simon Pinkstone, we've got Chris Nightingale. Just a few names that are coming in there. Again, we'll give people a little bit of grace. So if you are just joining us, again, familiarity with the Zoom platform. Apologies if I'm teaching you to suck eggs. We've all adopted similar platforms in recent weeks, but have a little play around whilst you're in there now, and whilst we're waiting for things to get started. So we've got, as I say, the chat function where you can send messages to the panelists and the attendees, fellow attendees. So it's always good to put some messages in there, let everyone know that you're here. And also the Q&A function. So if there's any pressing questions or anything to stem out of today's conversation, please fire away. Get those questions coming in. We'll do our utmost to get round to answering as many as we possibly can over the period of the next 45 minutes to an hour. So again, we'll just give people a little bit of time to settle in. Again, please do get involved today. We've got a couple of polls as well, so we will put those out to participants or attendees, and hopefully we'll get some good responses come in. But thank you very much once again for joining us today. Great to see so many people coming in. All right, so let's get ourselves started. So welcome to this, the first, as I say, of the Aston Barclay webinars, and the evolution of the vehicle remarketing sector. So this aligns with the release of Aston Barclay's Q2 Insights report. Hopefully everyone's been following those over the past several years that we've been producing them. And really, now's the time to open up the conversation. Obviously, we've faced unprecedented times as an industry, as a world even. So we're here to share some insights, discuss the truly exceptional circumstances that we've all found ourselves in, and also look ahead to later in the year. Everyone's looking for the crystal ball answer that unfortunately nobody's got, but we're all taking our best guesses at it right now. So for the next 60 minutes or so, we'll hear from some of the leading market authorities on the various data insights to stem from recent market activity, as well as some personal experiences, insights and opinions of what the market is currently going through. So we have, before we start, a little bit of a disclaimer, and again, always good practice to read these out as well as see them on the screen. So this webinar is provided for general information purposes only. It does not constitute specific strategic business advice. The opinions expressed in this webinar and on any of the following slides are solely those of the contributors and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the contributors' employer, organisation, committee or other group or individual. Joining us today then, we have Aston Barclay's very own Martin Potter, Managing Director of the Auctions. We have Paul Ford, owner of Fords of Winsford. And we have Darren Martin, Head of Valuations at CAP HPI. So, good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
All right, so we'll give each of you a little bit of a chance to introduce yourselves to, I'm sure there's many in here who are familiar with yourselves, but for anyone who doesn't know you, Martin, if I can start with you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mark. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the first webinar. Really pleased that you've come to join us. Hopefully you'll get something from the day. I'm MD of Auctions for Aston Barclay, been in the business for almost 30 years this year in various guises. So I've been around a little while. Been with Aston Barclay for the last 8 years, and we've been producing the Insight report since 2017, which I'm sure most of you receive. But we thought we'd obviously keen in these current times to share that via a webinar to give some insight, not only over the last few months, but to try and also look forward, as Mark has said. So hope everybody enjoys the day.
Fantastic. Thank you, Martin. And Martin will be taking us through the Q2 Insights report very shortly before we do open up the discussion. Paul, if I can come across to you, a little bit of an introduction from yourself.
Certainly. Well, we run 2 car supermarkets, one in Winsford and one in Cheshire, and one in Trafford Park at Manchester, right opposite the Trafford Centre. Carry just over 2,000 units in stock at any one time. Last month we did 668 vehicles across the month, which we thought was quite remarkable for the first month after lockdown. Personally, I've been involved in the motor industry now for nigh on 51 years, having been sent out initially with the checkbook at aged 11, which was a bit of a baptism by fire. But I've been buying cars ever since, and I'm still buying cars today, and that's what I know and what I enjoy. So, but trying to do it remotely through all these various online platforms, I do really like. I like to get involved with the touch and the feel of the cars, and in some cases the smell too. It's all important.
We've got a true petrol head on our hands, obviously, here with Paul.
Well,
so,
I wouldn't say a petrol head. I just like to see what I'm buying. That's what it is.
That's fair enough. We will cover that off very shortly as well in terms of are the dynamics of buying changing within the sector. They've kind of almost been forced to, but we'll delve into that very shortly. And Darren, over to you, if we may, please.
Yeah, Darren Martin, Head of Valuations for the UK for CAP HPI. I've been at CAP for 7.5 years. Before that, I worked for Vauxhall for 17 years. Last 5 years of that, looking after their residual values. So poacher turned gamekeeper, maybe went from the looking after the residual values to sort of managing them, reporting on them at CAP HPI. So I've got a team of car editors that produce current valuations, and bearing in mind what we're seeing in the market, get a raft of data in and then analyse that and investigate and then produce values off that. So no algorithms, but a very sophisticated system and industry experts, which we're quite proud of. I also head up the teams that look after LCVs, HGVs and bikes. So yeah, that's me. Been a very interesting time for the market. So thanks for inviting me on this.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks very much for joining us. And we know you're going through your 15 minutes of fame, as you termed it a moment ago. So Darren's featuring everywhere at the moment. So it's great to have him on board and share more of his valuable insights with us. So Martin, you are going to give us a little bit of a guide through the Insights report in terms of what we've published. Now, this is available via the Aston Barclay website. And for anyone attending today, you'll also be sent a link to this to download. So if you haven't yet seen it, but Martin's going to shed a bit more light on it for us. So I will jump across to share the screen. And if we go into, there we are, the man himself. So let's take centre stage, Martin.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Yeah, the what we're showing you slide-wise today is a bit of a cut-down version, so there is more in the actual report, so I advise you to download it. But welcome, everybody. We will obviously, the Insight report is about the Q2 performance, which, as we all know, is probably will go down in history as for all of us as one of the most unusual periods of time that we've been through and are working our way out of, with sort of cat values frozen and car dealers shutting down completely, unprecedented times. But I have to say that it's actually been amazing actually how people have adapted. We have been very lucky that we'd invested ourselves heavily into the digital arena. So I think we were shut down on the 23rd of March, and by the 3rd of April we were offering vehicles for sale for certainly those retailers that still needed to purchase stock with their online channels. So that proved to be very successful. I think buyers have reacted very well to the new world that we find ourselves in. Paul touched on it a moment ago. Everything obviously at this moment in time is online, as we all take the proper corporate responsibility approach of not creating gatherings in our auction halls. But I have to say the activity and volumes from the start of that quarter to the end couldn't be more dramatic in terms of the fact that we're pretty much back to pre-COVID levels towards the last few weeks of June, which is very, very pleasing to see. As all of us were very nervous, I'm sure, about how that recovery would happen and what it would look like as we return back to work. So very pleasing with that. And obviously also we'd like to try and talk about, rather than what's happened in the past, we try and help through the insights report. And I hope today will be more about that as well, is looking forward so that we can try and understand what's going to happen in the next few months. From my point of view, I think things are looking very, very good. Prices are very high, and I'm sure are at their highest, as we'll see when we go through some of the slides. I'm sure there'll be some discussions with there and there about whether it's reached a peak or not. There is more choice. I know there has been some noise in the press about dealers struggling to get enough product, but certainly there are more volumes coming in from all the sectors of manufacture, finance and fleets. Obviously there have been some logistical constraints in terms of the supply chain, but we're working through that, and actually there are plenty of cars coming through, so there will be good stock levels, I think, over the next 6 to 8 weeks, and until we get through, the market will remain quite strong. I think we'll see a slightly different August this year than previous, because not many people will be jetting off to Spain and the like. So we're hoping the market will stay strong, and September, obviously, there's a few challenges coming once we understand what the new market supply is going to be like. But certainly up until then, I think there'll be a strong market. So Mark, I don't know if you want to move on to the next. So I'm just going to cover a few areas. We're going to look at a few sectors in the market and some fuel types. This, as you can see, is the insight report that we've been running since Q1 2017. The great news is, despite the period that we were talking about, the fleet sector was very, very strong during that particular quarter, and actually was at its highest level that it had been since we've started doing the report back in 2017. And that's despite the fact that actually the age of the stock during that period was probably at its highest, at sort of 43 months average. And there is a trend for the mileage coming down, but I think that's been happening since sort of Q1, Q2 2018, where business users are obviously doing less miles as they start to adopt technologies that saves them travelling around. As I've said, in the fleet market, there are some good, healthy stock levels, so there should be plenty of retail stock available. But I think, as we all saw, the demand was much bigger than the supply, which has caused the strong market, and that does continue as we speak. Early first 2 weeks of July, it's continued in the same vein. Conversions are still very high, demand is still very high, so a very buoyant outlook at the moment. And I'm sure Paul will sort of enlighten us on some of the retail activity and consumer activity that people will want to understand as well over the next couple of weeks. So move on to fuel types, Mark.
Yep.
Also going to dealer market, sorry, we'll cover fuels later on, do apologise. So the dealer market, we split into 3 sections, sort of young part exchange, older part exchange, and then budget. And I think in this sector, there's one sort of strain of the story across all the 3 sectors, in as much as there's been a strong demand for value product in the marketplace, where consumers are looking for value and price range products. And I think due to the fact that the dealerships were shut and only returned from the 1st of August, we've seen a shortage of stock in the very first couple of weeks of June, where the dealers were getting back to work, and obviously the part exchanges weren't necessarily flowing through at the pre-COVID levels, and therefore the demand was well outstripped in these 3 value sectors, and that's caused, as you can see here, a large spike in terms of the average sale price for that product, despite the fact that the average age is sort of just under that sort of 68-month mark. So lots of value in those sectors. And I think the thing I wanted to sort of just, if you click onto the next slide, Mark, because it's a very similar, the slides you'll see are very similar. So every single sector has grown dramatically in terms of the average sale price. And I think that was certainly reflected in the cap pricing as well, where I think these particular sectors went up by something like sort of 2.7 and 5.4%. We've seen rises in prices for old part exchanges at sort of 13, and the over 10-year stock price rises of 15% from Q1 to Q2, which is obviously unprecedented in the market. But I think that's, like I say, as a result of perhaps the dealer sector not providing us at that point in time with quite so much part exchange stock. And that's starting to flow through now as the businesses are getting back to some sort of new normal. But there is still a great deal of demand. And actually one of the biggest things for any of the retailers on the webinar was to not underestimate the value and potential profit opportunities there are in that value product from a part exchange point of view. I know a couple of retailers that we work with have sort of indicated their profits during this time have almost been as much as they're making out of the retail deals. So it's been very, very healthy for a number of retailers. So, and there is a market for even some of these sort of 126-month-old stock. There is still a market for this value product. So yeah, I would say just don't underestimate the potential there for some profits for retailers. And then we thought we would look at fuel types because obviously I know there's always a lot of noise in the press about this sort of changing sector. And we see that sort of diesel new registrations are sort of dropping as alternative fuels are coming in. But for many of you that are probably on the call, we don't have to go very far back to remember that the number of diesel registrations were as high as sort of 67–70% of all new car registrations not that long ago. So as we all know, there's still quite a number of those to come out into the market in the wholesale arena over the next sort of 18 months to 2 years. So I'm pleased to report that actually all three sectors actually increased in value over the Q2 period. But as you can see, certainly diesel from a used perspective is certainly holding up very well, and obviously is still something that the consumer has a demand for when they're working out whether something's of value or giving them good value in terms of their own personal usage needs. So I think that's, and it's good to see that diesel product actually hasn't fallen away dramatically like the new registrations has, and I think that will stay strong because the consumer seems to demand it. And I have indicated that maybe where the pressure is right now is actually more in the alternative fuel sector, mainly because they fit two categories, I believe. They're obviously a lot younger than the standard sort of vehicles that are coming out because in numbers they've been being registered in the last 18 months. But I think their overall starting new price and therefore their expected wholesale price does look quite expensive when the consumer's comparing that with alternative petrol or diesel models. And I know there have been a number of manufacturers recently that are offering deals on a new alternative fuel vehicle. So the gap between that new and the used is actually narrowing. So I do think from an outlook point of view, they may be one to watch out for and just be a little more cautious on over the next couple of 3 months. So that was the fuel situation, Mark, and that's maybe too quickly, but there's probably lots to discuss out of that. And as I say, the overall report has a bit more detail, but just that's what I want to share with you now. And I'm sure Mark will elaborate on most of those slides.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Martin. So what we'll do, again, we want to get people involved in this. So we've got a couple of polls set up. And what we'll do is we'll set those live just while we carry on the conversation. So give Martin a little bit of a respite for a moment or two. So this one is, and again, it's something that's been referred to in the media quite a lot and something we've kind of spoken about in the build up to this, but this reference to a bubble. So the industry seems to have bounced back extremely well, extremely successfully. Prices are being reported as, increasing week on week, day by day, almost in some cases. So, and I'm sure Darren will give us an insight into that very shortly. But we're just going to set the poll live. So how long will the bubble last? There will be a dip, but it won't burst. 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, or non-existent. We are now in the new normal. So we'll leave that to run. So I'm going to come across to you, Paul, if I may. And from all that Martin said there, can you give us a perspective from your side, from how you're seeing things, in the last, if you like, few weeks, and what it's like on a sort of day-to-day basis almost?
Yeah, surely we're seeing a very consistent level of consumer demand. Consumers' buying habits we see have changed. They used to be focused at weekends, but obviously now everybody's got a little bit more free time, or their free time is differently distributed. So we're actually seeing a much more even pattern as to the amount of business we're doing during the course of a week. So it's still weighted towards the weekend. We still do the majority of the business at the weekend, but the weekdays are much stronger than they were. I know the one issue we've got, I think, is from our own turnaround perspective, is actually the speed which we can get cars on sale from point of purchase, and that we're governed by our own internal policies, which restrict the number of people that we can get safely into our buildings. So that's causing us a few headaches. But from a retail perspective, everything's strong. Customers are being rather more flexible than they used to be. I think they've all got accustomed to queuing outside Tesco or whatever their supermarket of choice might be. And so if we make them wait 10 or 15 minutes, they don't seem to be too bothered, which is quite a nice change. We're not having customers demanding test drives, which from a health and safety perspective, we would find a bit of a challenge. We've chosen not to go down the unaccompanied test drive route. We think that's far too risky from an insurance and for other reasons as well. And we certainly don't want staff out with customers on the road either at the moment, not in confined spaces. I know Martin's touched on the strength of of what I'll term the budget market. But as Martin's well aware, we run our own auction internally twice a week for our part exchanges, and we've seen returns on those that were way above expectations. And I mean, say if 10 to 15% above what we were expecting, and in certain cases 20 and 25% in isolated vehicles, but across the board 10 to 15% better than we would hope. So
that's great. Thank you very much indeed, Paul. And that's probably a prompt to jump across to Darren, sorry. And just give us as I say, a little bit of insight from obviously CAP HPI's perspective in terms of how the thinking aligns with obviously the data we've just seen from Martin, and what we're generally feeling out there in the market right now.
Yeah, I think we're very well aligned with what both of the guys have said. We saw, I think first of all, the way the auctions have come back to full strength really by selling online has been an absolute credit to them, because there's been obviously when it went into lockdown, no one quite knew what the situation was going to be. Not every auction around was looking at and was used to selling online. So the way that the volumes increased, so as Martin said in his presentation, we didn't move any values for the first for anything in our live product during April. So we have a live daily product where we're reviewing the volumes. The volumes were there, but not high enough. They were about 5% of normal times, but it's still 1,000 cars a week was selling at that time. So that gradually increased. Then from May, we started moving values again, mainly on older cars, but those were the cars that were selling at the time. And then we started to move cars of all ages in June, and I think we were taken by surprise by what happened in June, because the market was just fantastic. I think the independents were probably faster back up and running. The franchise dealers were focusing a little bit on clearing up some of the March activity, because obviously when shutdown happened or lockdown happened 23rd of March, there was still a lot of cars around that either were ordered or needed to be registered, that type of thing. So in June, we saw values increasing, which is very rare for that time of year, but obviously there's been a 2-month break. there was pent-up demand from consumers. There was consumers looking for cars that hadn't had a car previously because they were scared of public transport or didn't want to go on public transport. Saw people downsizing from expensive cars into cheaper cars, anything sort of £12,000 retail or below. German brands that look good on your driveway, 5, 6, 7 years old. They were all popular. We put values up on older cars. We had a bit of a two-tier market, really. We saw some of that more expensive, younger stuff go down in value, and some of the older stuff going up in value. And agree with some of the percentages that Paul gave there, where you were seeing cars going up by 15, 20%. I think the biggest one we've seen was almost 40%. I mean, it's a £2,000 car that's gone to nearly £3,000, but it's just some of that cheaper end of the market is very, very popular, and people wanting to buy a car in that area. And obviously, cars are reliable for longer now, so it makes sense to do that. And people are wary of the public transport side. So, and you've also got people that are maybe saved up a bit of money during this time as well. They've not been going out. They've not got holidays. They're looking for a toy potentially. So we've seen some older convertibles going up in value. We've had great weather. And people are looking for something that looks nice on their driveway that is a bit of a toy as well. So, yeah, it's been a really strong time, and it's kind of that was June, and it's carried on in July without the increases really, but it's bubbling along the top at the moment really.
Okay, fabulous, great insight there, really, really great. And just to share the results from the poll, so 59%, there will be a dip, but it won't burst. The bubble won't burst. Or how long will the bubble last? 6 months. So 41% thinking it will last 6 months. Sorry. So Martin, on that note, and obviously with what we've just gleaned from the audience there, what does the here and now look like, and what are looking ahead short term to begin with, but kind of the challenges and opportunities? Darren's already spoken about, if you like, specific vehicle types, price variants. Paul's alluded to, you've alluded to it in the report, but can you give us a little bit more of an insight in terms of where we're currently looking?
Yeah, like I said, I think certainly I believe into middle of September, I think we're still going to hopefully see that strong market. I think there will be enough choice. There doesn't seem to be any dip. People talk about this sort of bubble, and I think the thing that gets me to that point is the sort of stuff Paul's been saying, where he's had regular consumer activity. There hasn't been this sort of, even if there was an initial burst, and as Darren mentions, getting through some of the March orders that obviously were delayed. We all talked about a bubble in my eyes as something that would have a big peak and then it would sort of drop off, and that doesn't appear to be happening. So that's I think very promising in terms of the market actually becoming a bit of a new normal. I think we're all obviously a little nervous about that September-October time, because we're all in a very fluid situation in terms of keeping the R rating down and all doing the right and sensible things to make sure that we don't step back a step or two. And I think the country's been very good at that. And obviously we've got the end of furlough come the end of October. So I think, yes, most people are a little nervous about what the back end of the year looks like. But I certainly think between now and September, short-term out view is still looking very good, very strong. There will be products available for retailers, and like Darren's mentioned, I actually think it won't be similar August to previous August, in as much as I do think there are a number of people that have actually managed to save a little bit of money during this sort of strange furlough period, because they haven't been out and spending it, and they're not now going on holiday. So it's amazing that people get a bit of fun out of changing their car and looking for something else. So I think certainly till mid-September good. After that, I don't want to talk the job down. I just think they're, like Darren may have touched on a bit, there may be a little bit of movement in the market because it's so strong that I think, in the world of what goes up must come down, and we are dealing with depreciating assets at the end of the day.
Liabilities, they're known as.
Sorry, Paul?
Liabilities, they're known as.
Yeah. So, these things can't keep rising and rising, but I think we're all very, very pleased. None of us expected the market to bounce back like it did, and I think it's actually gone on long enough for us to get some comfort from the fact that actually this might just be a new normal, and I don't think there has been this peak and trough, and hopefully we won't see that until we get through to September, October. And the only two things there is obviously furlough impact and new car registration. But at the moment, speaking with Darren's colleagues this week, new car supply seems to be okay. Obviously, there's some manufacturers that are struggling and others that are okay. But again, that in the short-term pipeline doesn't seem to be a problem leading into September. Once we get to September, we'll obviously know more.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Martin. And Paul, come across to you. You know, how far ahead are you kind of thinking in terms of, you know, stock, what kind of, you know, what share of stock you have, the portfolio that you hold, and again, across your two sites, in essence, you know, has there been variance there? Is there differences in the way you're approaching things from site to site?
We don't really approach things differently on a site-by-site basis. That said, Manchester, the site, tends to do quite well with what you might term the lifestyle vehicles. That's probably proximity to Trafford Centre, that helps. But it also does quite well with an alternative fuel vehicle and does very well with the city cars, which we do less well with at Winsford, really, to be honest. And Manchester seems to be where we can sell a few petrols. Winsford, where we're out in the sticks, everybody really rather have a diesel, if you don't mind. You know, try and talk them round as much as you want, but I'm sorry, you know, we're still doing 25,000 miles a year, and we'll put some oil in the tank rather than petrol. You know, it seems to work better, and it's still the right fuel choice for so many people in terms of practicality, reliability, and predictability as well. I think reliability is another key factor. So that seems to work. That's what we're seeing anyway. But as far as how far we plan ahead, we can only really plan as far ahead as the stock availability will allow us to. So we're tending to buy. We tend not to plan the portfolio. We're just having a look at what's out in the market, assessing where we want to dip in, where we want to take a back seat. And historically, we've moved away from ex-rental cars, but I think they've gone full circle now from being relative. I didn't think they offered value for money 6 months ago. I think they're offering value for money again now, particularly some of these very late Merc products. A-Class in particular, I think, has gone from being 21 grand retail, 22 grand retail, to suddenly being able to get them on 19 plates, sub 20. And I think they're starting to look very good value now. But I think it's just spying opportunities. But there are too many of certain cars in the market. There are more than the market can take, and particular things that worry me at the minute are Tucson and Sportage, particularly at the bottom end of the market. Sportage 1s, there's just too many. Sportage 2s, there's probably about right. 3s are okay, 4s are okay, but you know, Tucson SEs without nav, what's the point? Who wants that? But there's no shortage. They're everywhere. Everybody's got half a dozen on the front. We've probably got 2 dozen on the front. But when there's that much choice, what makes the customer come to you? That's the point I'm trying to make. If you're trying to differentiate yourself and make the customer come to you rather than go elsewhere, then you have to have something that stands out from the crowd.
Definitely. We will come back to you on that one, Paul, because we'll touch upon human behaviours, if you like, very shortly.
Yeah. Okay.
Darren, I'll come across to you, and Martin's kind of already mentioned, you know, specific months or timelines to look at. And yourself quoted in AM as talking about a market correction possibly later in the year. Car dealer referred to a perfect storm in August. So can you just expand on those sort of ideas or you know, theories for us a little bit?
And your homework on what I've been saying. I was just about to phone the office and get people to start looking at Sportage and Tucson, actually. But, so yeah, I think what we've done some analysis on what's happened to values over the last year, really. And because this time last year, values were quite low. There was a dip in the market last summer. So we're starting from a low point there with values sort of realigned. Since then, we had a strong end to last year. We had a strong start to this year. You then had a couple of months where values didn't move because of the COVID crisis, and then you had a really strong June. So if you put all of those factors together, you've got some high prices out there again. City car on average is worth about 12% more than a year ago, the same age and mileage point. So looking at 3 years, 60,000 mile car, the equivalent vehicle is more expensive. And yeah, it's a cliche, but what goes up does come down, and you can track that over time. That does tend to happen. So, as I said earlier, I think we're bundling along the top at the moment. I think it's good for now. I think it will be good for a few more weeks. And we kind of said that once June got underway, we sort of thought this will carry on June, July, potentially into August. You then get a little bit of an unravelling of the furlough scheme. There are still a lot of people who aren't back at work. If they're not back at work now, then that obviously would be a bit of a concern. Are they going to come back at all? There's talk of unemployment, of fairly high levels of unemployment. So I think you're going to get an economic impact, and that's not to say that used cars do badly when there's an economic downturn. It's just price is affected. People will still want to buy used cars, but they won't necessarily want to go and buy those expensive examples. The younger used cars will come under pressure more. I think you're going to get that economic impact just at the time that some of the extensions coming to an end from the leasing industry, from PCPs. Those cars are going to start to come back. I think there is still a little bit of a logistics backlog in some areas of the market, so you're going to get more volume coming back from that. So I think you're going to get heavy supply levels just as a bit of an economic downturn tends to hit, and everybody's talking recession. So I think that added into values being high at the moment could mean that prices will come down, and quarter 4 does tend to be the weakest quarter of the year anyway. So we're not saying it's going to happen. I just think there is a bit of a warning there that there could be a downturn in prices from sort of September onwards, and it could sort of stretch into next year. And I think, again, volumes will be high from previous years. You've obviously got high registrations that have happened up until this point, but there's still those volumes to come back. So I just think there's a little bit of a warning there that it's good for now, and it's going to carry on like this for a little while yet, but at some point there will be some downturn in prices, but not necessarily downturn in volumes and in the market and all that type of thing. I think people will still look to buy used cars, especially older used cars again. And people are being careful, people are being prudent, so they will be looking at those cheaper end of the market. And I would say the biggest concern would be around the sort of under 1 year old cars that can be expensive. Are people going to want to go and part with 20, 25 grand on a used car at that point, I think? And Paul said it about Mercedes, that you can already see a little bit of that happening.
Yeah, okay, that's great stuff. And Paul, I'll come back to you further on if you like, the human behaviour side of things. So what are you kind of seeing from a customer perspective? You know, we've already alluded to much of, you know, what we're looking at in terms of timelines, furloughs, people at home behaving differently, you know, potentially. Some people are kind of pent up, looking to buy something as a toy, as a treat for themselves coming out of this. But, you know, are you seeing those kind of behaviours? Are you seeing the way that your business interacts differently with people, and how those customers are coming to you?
To some extent, but I would say it's a very limited extent. I think in those, probably the first week or 10 days of opening, we opened from 4th of June. I would say that it was perhaps a little bit unpredictable at that point, but it's much more predictable now. It's gone back to how it was, and I think prudence has taken over. I think everybody's trying to be sensible. I think we are seeing more people who would perhaps have bought new, looking to buy used. and we're seeing a lot of customers who are perhaps moving very slightly up market, looking for a feel-good factor, perhaps. Darren might call it a toy, but it's something to put a smile on your face, isn't it? That's in a time of what could be quite lengthy hardship going forward. We hope not, but who knows? That's not very convenient. But customers have changed, that's for sure. And moving down market is something we have seen. That bottom end of the market is strong. Underwriters, from finance perspective, are being rather more cautious than they were. I don't know whether anybody else has noticed that. I'm sure that other retailers will have found that as well. And that I think is driving the values of those vehicles up to sort of £12,000–15,000 retailed. 10,000. There seems to be a sort of a £10,000 loan sort of ceiling for a lot of people now, for a lot of customers. So I don't know whether anybody else is seeing that, but that's certainly what we're seeing.
Great stuff. Well, if anyone is and anyone's attending, or you can support Paul's debate there or go against it, just drop a line in the chat. Again, Q&A function. If anyone's got any questions for the panelists, please pose them, put them forward. We're going to set up another poll because we're going to jump across now onto fuel types. And Martin, you obviously showed some slides there, and we spoke about kind of the EV market specifically, or hybrid alternative fuel, should I say. So the poll, we'll launch the poll. So what is your go-to fuel type of choice? And in 12 months, what's your fuel type of choice? So we'll leave that running as we discuss it. Martin, can you give us a little bit more in terms of, the fuel types, what we've seen specifically, resurgence in diesel potentially, alternative fuel types continue to rocket, and where's it all going to go?
Yeah, well, I think, Mark, obviously we're in that sort of process of change. Like we've said, the new registrations has obviously been very much increasing in the alternative fuel sectors, some of that driven by the benefit in kind measures that the government are obviously putting on people. So alternative fuel becomes a very, or almost the only choice for a business car user. However, and I'm always keen to say that obviously for our customer base, we're having to work with product that's sort of 36, 40 months old. So there's still a lot of diesel to come yet in the market. So I am quite pleased that actually, as Paul indicated, a lot of consumers are still happy to buy diesel because it works for them. It's economical. It does a lot of miles to the gallon. Recently, obviously, fuel prices generally have helped that situation as well, of course. But we will go through change. And I know this is a conversation Darren and I have had lots of times where you sort of try and predict values on diesel going forward. I actually think they'll probably get to a point as they become rarer and rarer that actually increase in value. There will come a tipping point when actually there's a demand and there's just not that many about anymore. But we will obviously move more and more to alternative fuels because that's what's being registered, and therefore that's what will be out in the marketplace. And I'm sure as the infrastructure improves and people start to get used to the range of this product starts to grow, then obviously the client and consumer anxieties around that will start to dissipate, and hopefully that will start to be able to cope with the levelling of consumer demand and the amount that's coming out in the market. But I mean, it's been, I think for us, it's still only a single digit percentage of our overall volume, but that is going to change quite dramatically, quite quickly. So I think for sort of fleet customers, it certainly exceeds that. We're already running at sort of every sale, you'll have at least 10% of your entry will be an alternative fuel or hybrid vehicle. Overall, obviously, because we still sell quite a high proportion of that value product, it's still only about sort of 6 to 8% of our overall volume. But as I've said, I think in the next 24 months, that will change significantly as the diesels registered 2 and a bit years ago start to come back out, and then that's replaced with an almost opposite of where we had 70% diesel new registrations 2-3 years ago. it's exact opposite to that now, isn't it, with similar numbers for alternative fuels. So it's definitely going to change, that's for sure.
All right, great stuff. Let's bring it into the poll so we can see the results there, and we'll come across to you, Darren. So we've got go to fuel type of choice at the moment: diesel 32%, petrol 26%, hybrid 37%, and pure electric 5%. 12 months time, hybrid takes it 47%, diesel 21%, petrol 16%, and electric 16%. So quite a significant change there. Is that again? Does that tie in with the market thinking, Darren, in terms of where you're at to cap HPI?
I agree with well, yeah, obviously you can't argue with the poll results. I'm surprised the hybrid is quite so high as that. Probably not surprised that electric is so low. We've certainly seen some strength in diesel values recently. To be fair, they've never really completely softened. They've always been popular. There's a lot of volume out there, as Martin said, but they do a job for you, and also they're quite clean cars as well. There's not an issue there. It's not really very widely sort of put into the press because it's not a very good story, but they are diesel cars are a clean fuel of choice. If you are coming out of a company car, which a lot of people have done over the last few years anyway, by taking a cash allowance, but you still do the miles, you probably want to still go into a diesel vehicle. So they're quite good news there. I think what we're seeing at the moment is we've seen some weakness in the alternative fuel prices, definitely. They're expensive cars compared to their petrol or diesel equivalents. So we're seeing that people want to buy a car. They're not too keen on going expensive. So if you look at those four fuel types, petrol and diesel are the most, they're probably the best value. So people aren't taking a leap of faith, which you almost have to do with an electric vehicle. So stick with what you know, stick to petrol, diesel. Volumes will increase in hybrids and electrics over time, as will the acceptance, as will the infrastructure, as Martin has said. But at the moment, I think people are happy with a petrol or a diesel. I think the tipping point for diesel could be sort of clean air zones and things like that. If you can't drive your diesel vehicle into city centres and you live on the outskirts, that will become an issue to buying them in the future. But at the moment, they're not too widespread. I think some have been put back because of COVID as well, because they don't want to affect businesses within those city centres. So at the moment, petrol and diesel are doing really well. We saw that last month. We've seen it again this month. But it is those petrol hybrid cars that are under pressure, and electric cars that are under pressure. But mainly that is because they are expensive and they need to reach a price point. Not across the board, but we've certainly seen that sort of on average. Some of those electric cars and the hybrids are the ones that are struggling and are in less demand, really.
Okay, brilliant stuff. And then Paul, from your point of view, do those findings sort of align with the business that you're experiencing?
They do, really. I mean, so we're seeing quite strong interest in pure electrics at a certain price point. Now, if I were to wind the clock back 18 months, Zoe was very good value and could be bought very cheaply, even battery lease or whatever it might have been. But those cars have gone up like for like, I would think probably in the region of 25% in the last 18 months, and no longer quite offer they're not quite the value proposition that they were. They were a very light-hearted proposition when they were £5,500 or thereabouts to buy wholesale. When there's 7.5 and 8 for something very similar 18 months on, it does just make you ask the question: where are we going to go with these? Because you're into the realms of buying a Leaf, which, all right, maybe not be the most attractive thing on the planet, but it has got a little bit more space. It doesn't drive quite as well as a Zoe, but more space for the average family user. Concern we have with alternative fuel vehicles at the moment is the price differential between an equivalent petrol or diesel and the hybrid variant. And you only have to look at C classes or whatever it might be, and there can be £3,000 or £4,000 of a gap. Well, what's the customer getting for his £3,000 or £4,000? he's not gaining fuel economy. It's going to probably cost him more to run a hybrid than it is to run a pure diesel. If you take road fund and such like out of it, because let's face it, the vast majority of these hybrids are fairly heavy and not particularly economical. And I think there's also an area of concern from consumers that they simply do not want the complexity. All they see is a huge repair bill looming. They just don't know how much or when. And the other issue, of course, is when it does go wrong, who are you going to get to repair it? Because the number of qualified technicians who are prepared to work on these high voltage systems is very limited. And the training, they need to be kept, those technicians need to be kept up to date with the training on a probably quarterly basis, really. And that's causing us a few issues, I have to say. Is how as an industry can we drive acceptance of hybrid? Because it's probably going to be with us for a relatively brief period. Certainly isn't going to be with us for as long as petrol and diesel have been with us. There's going to be an end to hybrid, probably. I don't know what Darren thinks. Do you think that hydrogen or pure electric will wholly take over in the next sort of 10 to 15 years?
Yeah, I think in the next, definitely in that sort of time period, electric is going to be is going to slowly take over from hybrid technology as the ranges increase. There's hydrogen trials sort of going on, and there's hydrogen fuel stations that they've set up. I think it was in Switzerland. So we'll go the same way as that, and it's just the infrastructure behind that type of thing. So yeah, there's definitely potential. At the moment, there's a couple of hydrogen cars out there, but they're very expensive as well, and needs to be more infrastructure and probably more of them, and the price to come down. But when that happens, then yeah, there's definitely the opportunity. And obviously, government legislation is going that way as well. So it's going to be that's partly why there's sort of no scrappage scheme, or there's sort of a lack of incentives at the moment, because the government can't be seen to be pushing internal combustion engine, pushing those sort of cars into the market now. So there's no point incentivizing electric vehicles at the moment anymore, because they've been incentivized, but you can't really get any more through than are coming through anyway. So I think that's why there's been a lack of clarity from the government on sort of something to incentivize the industry, because it goes against the grain of what they've been doing recently. So yeah, I would agree, Paul, that they are going to be that technology is coming, but certainly electric, I think, is pure electric will come quicker.
Brilliant. Right, we probably found a theme for a future webinar there as well. So moving on, because we are very conscious of time, we've got a few minutes left, but again, final poll for today. So if you can join in and cast your vote there. So is confidence. How much confidence do you have in the market for Q3? So we're just going to zip around to the three of you very briefly. We'll come to yourself first, Paul. So going into Q3, confidence factor for you, you can grade it on the 1 to 10 scale if you like, 1 low, 10 high. Where would you put yourself?
I think we're, based on what we're seeing, I think we're in the top quartile, somewhere between 8 and 9. I would have thought, realistically. I think as we get more people back into the business, I think slowly but surely, restrictions on what we can and can't do within the buildings will be lifted. Customers will become much more accepting of the restrictions that we're all working under, and I think that this quarter will be kind to us. I'm not going to say it's going to be good, but I think it will be kind. The final quarter, I'm not so sure about. I think there's a lot of things bubbling that could ruin the final quarter of this year. And I think you need some fat on your back by the end of September or October, really. And if you haven't, you'll be in trouble.
Okay, super wise words there, Paul. Darren, I'll skip across to you again, just very briefly. Where would you kind of put the the overall market confidence on that scale of 1 to 10?
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree. I'd give it an 8 at the moment. I mean, it's surpassed all expectations. If you think June was probably a 9, maybe even a 10. So if you're looking now, I would say we're at an 8, and it will carry on. But again, the warning earlier that there's probably some dark clouds to come. But at the moment, it's going well. Make hay while the sun shines, I would say at the moment, and hopefully that will continue for a good few weeks yet.
Brilliant, thanks, Darren. And last word from you, Martin. How would you sum it all up going into Q3/Q4?
Yeah, well, I always see the glass half full. So, but I think, like Darren touched on a minute ago, actually, I think that even though things might get a little tougher and there's quite a few things that obviously can change stuff, I actually agree with Darren that it might not mean that the used car market loses its buoyancy, because actually I think there may be a situation that, depending on new car availability, etc., that people, and as Paul alluded to earlier, already some consumers are turning to used rather than new, and I actually think that that may well happen during that last quarter as well. So whilst the prices achieved, certainly from a wholesale environment, and the target pricing from a retail perspective might be slightly different, I actually do think that the used car market will be able to hold up quite well during those times. And I think that has been proved in the past when we've had difficult economic times. The used car market, because it's very mature in this country, has actually managed to ride through it very well. So I would agree. I think it's been a 9 or a 10 for June. It's going to stay an 8 for July, and I think I'd like to think it would stay around that 6 or 7 mark towards the end of the year.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. And just those poll results, in case anyone's dialed in on the phones, 47% put it at an 8 out of 10, 29% at 7, and then 12% respectively at 5 or 6. So it's good. Confidence is high. Well, that brings us to an end of the first Aston Barclay webinar. So I hope everybody's enjoyed it. Thank you very much indeed to Martin, Paul and Darren. For anyone who's joined us, again, the report is available via the Aston Barclay website. So go and see that and download the report there. Aston Barclay will follow up anyway with everyone who's registered and or attended, and we'll send you some further information. But thank you very much indeed for your time, for all the input. It's been fantastic. And of course, for joining us. Have yourselves a fantastic weekend. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you very much.